I'd like to welcome all of you to the 14th season of Word Plays at Proctor's, but now on Zoom. Word Plays is produced by Story Circle at Proctor's. I'm Kate Detting, one of the producers, along with Joe Doolittle, who's one of our tellers today, and Siri Allison. Our format will be very similar to when we were at Proctor's. We'll have 4 stories, all on today's topic, lemons to lemonade. And then we'll have a very brief intermission. You'll have to provide your own snacks. Sorry, that we just can't do that with Zoom. And then we'll come back for 4 more stories. Claire Nolan is our co-host, and she's putting things in chat, links in chat for us. And anything else you want to add, Claire?
Not at this time, but I'll be patient with me. I'll try to be quick in spotlighting our tellers. If at any time you're having trouble seeing anyone, just send me a chat and I'll make sure that I didn't press the wrong button. I did that to poor Kate a few minutes ago. I wanted to spotlight her and instead I turned off her picture entirely. So, so I'll try not to do that again.
She was very quick in correcting that, so we shouldn't worry about that at all. Now, usually I ask our tellers a question, and I use that to link the stories together. Today's question was, if your story was a food, what would it be? Our first storyteller is Fran Berger from Castleton. She's going to be telling a personal story, snow telling, and she said her story food would be s'mores. So please welcome Fran Berger and her story.
Hello there. Good to see you all, sort of. This story's called Snow Telling. I was part, many, many moons ago, of a group of mothers leading our Girl Scout troop in Boulder, Colorado. And we worked together with the Mile High Girl Scout Council, trying to convince the Boy Scouts to let us use their national camping site, the Ben de la Tour Boy Scout Camp, north and west of Fort Collins, Colorado. You'd think it'd be an easy thing to do, but it took us 1.5 years, and we finally got a date. The only date they could give us, however, was October. Mid-October. Pretty dicey when you talk about Colorado mountains, but we had faith because it had been a really, really beautiful champagne autumn, long, hot, wonderful days, very little even wind and breeze, let alone snow, no snow, a little rain. It was forecast to be a very beautiful weekend. We were very excited, not just our little troop of about 14 or 15 girls. There were a number of troops adding up to 200 girls. And we were all converging on the Ben de la Tour camp. We left on a Saturday morning, bright and early. And it took us about 1.5 hours, all caravanning up there to arrive and to get our camping sites delegated, get our girls organized, make sure that they knew how to put up their tents, and to get them set up in the various activities that we had set for them. Now, it was put out strongly, firmly, and clearly, and repeatedly to every parent. These are 10-year-old girls. Make sure, besides sneakers or tennis shoes, they put hiking shoes or snow boots, because we have no idea what will happen in the mountains at night. Everyone verbally said there was compliance. We had to take them at their word. And we got the girls all fed for lunch because everyone had their own breakfast. And we had wonderful potato sack races. We had running with the egg in the spoon. We played ball, and the girls got free time to play tennis. And there were wonderful tennis courts. It's a beautiful, many thousand acre camp with everything that you would want except keys to cabins. We had no keys to cabins. we simply were tent camping. And there was one main meeting room that we could access, but everything else had been locked up for the season. Now, I'm not sure among all of those various leaders who had the key to what, but we certainly didn't have one. And the girls and in our area, they split us in half. So our half of, maybe 100 girls. There was a huge, huge area to make a campfire and circle. So after we had our dinners, we got together and made s'mores. We made s'mores, we sang songs, we had a wonderful time. It was getting chilly, but it gets chilly at night in the mountains. So everybody put on their jackets, and then we all made sure our rain flies were tight, because you could expect at least some rain. And that's just a little extra structure that goes over the tent. It's about 6 inches above your tent, so that if it rains down, the rain pours off that structure and it doesn't flatten your tent. Well, we climbed in and we were pretty tight, and everybody was really tired. It had been a very long day. And sure enough, there were some gathering clouds and the rain started pittering and pattering and pittering and pattering, and the rain flies were holding and everything was fine. But then it just started getting colder and colder, and the rain stopped, which was even better. We were glad. The storm moved on. Good enough for us. And then ping, 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 ping. I stuck my head out. Oh, it had gone from rain to sleet. Oh, that's not good. If it stays sleet, it's good. But I don't know. I looked back at the sleeping girls, and one of the mothers nodded her head at me. She's listening to ping, 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 too. The next thing you know, ping, 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 goes silent. Good or bad? Good or bad? I stick my head out. Flakes are swirling around me. For the next hour and a half, I'm up sweeping off the top of the rain fly. Then another mother is, and then another mother. There were 3 mothers in that tent. And we went in and out like little cuckoos on a cuckoo clock, in and out to clean the snow off as it began to droop and droop and droop down upon us. And it came faster and faster and faster. And we were in and out, in and out, and in and out. And finally, one of the mothers said, "Get the girls up." Because the snow started coming so fast, we couldn't get out there to keep it from drooping. And the tent was beginning to crowd in on us. And we were beginning to get not only wet, but very, very cold. So we gathered the girls up and said, "All right, get into your packs and get your boots." In our tent, one girl had boots, and it wasn't my daughter. She swore she packed them, but they weren't there. We were a quarter mile, 1/4 mile from that one building that was open to us. And mothers were out shouting next to the tents. Some of them were taking down the flies and pulling out sleeping bags and trying to stuff them into cars. And it was a bit of a melee till one of the mothers decided that she was going to organize everyone into a long line and start marching. Regardless, she just pointed at us all and assigned people. I was a marcher. Other people were tent breakers. Other people were gathering gear, and the slog began. It was messy. It was cold. It started howling, and it came down so fast it was hard to see your hand in front of you. What we had to do is keep a body count and make sure we didn't lose anybody on the trail. And these girls, some of them had not taken a very heavy jacket. So by the time we got into that building, there were soaking, soggy, miserable little girls crying that they were cold. And some of them had grabbed some towels, and so we were trying to towel people off and bring them in, and kept bringing them in, and we kept bringing them in until it began to be very, very crowded. The mothers assigned to the outdoor duties finally stomped their way in, and everyone was standing up kind of against each other. And I really am not exaggerating very much in that we were almost sardine-like vertically. We decided that we had to do our best to sleep on the floor in that building because we were stuck in quite a blizzard and with a lot of soggy children. So we did have one corner by the door where people threw their shoes and their wet socks. And then we had enough body heat that pretty soon it got warm in that cabin. However, it was so crowded that we literally had to lay down on our sides. There was no place to stretch your arms, lay on your back, kick your feet out. We had to get 200 girls to cooperate to lie on their sides to go to sleep. It took us the better part of an hour to get people calmed down enough. And then I had to crawl into the one slot that was left for me. And maybe, I don't know, well after midnight into 1 in the morning, I drifted off. And there we were, steaming, exhausted, sardined, when I don't know whether it was our heat. I don't know whether it was a malfunction in the electricity, but the fire alarm would not go off. Everyone was yelling. Everyone was screaming. The littlest girls were very, very upset. And one of the mothers went out. I don't know, she was in charge of more than I was. She went out searching for some kind of electricity to throw. But when she did, the lights went out and the heat. But there were so many of us in there, we kept each other warm. And at last there was silence. Maybe it was 3 in the morning. Well, dawn finally came and the light shone through and people started grumping. But somebody was of good cheer. They cleaned people off the kitchen counters. Yes, they were sleeping up on the counters. and people started coming in and making pancakes and eggs. So they had flipped the electricity back on and the girls were sitting up and grumbling, but at least they were getting something to eat. And then we did not have cell phones at that point. It was 30 plus years ago. So somebody, I do not know who, got into a main cabin by taking the responsibility to break a window and use the administrative phone to get us some help up there. We needed snowplows. We could not get down those roads. We were completely snowed in. Then we found the shovels in the same building where we had found a phone, and we were able to shovel around the cars so that when we did get plowed out, we could get out. And it was, well, people were busy well into the morning, but in the meanwhile, there wasn't a whole lot to do with these girls. And so they said, Fred, you're a storyteller, we know that. Keep them busy. So I got to share the world of storytelling with these girls. They lasted through about 3 stories, and they were getting all edgy when I said, tell me about your family. Tell me about a story at your house. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, tell me when your little brother did something that you thought was really silly. Tell me about something that happened that really surprised you. Tell me the funniest thing you ever saw your mother do. Before I knew it, hands were up everywhere. And they went for 2.5 hours sharing their family stories and giggling until we were told that we could get out and move on. So storytelling certainly came to help at that point. And then as we were coming down the road, a fog rolled in. And as we got down the mountain to the dirt road that would lead out to the highway, we met a herd of cattle. It's called open range. The forest, what am I trying to say? The state lets people free range their cattle, and the Boy Scouts did the same because they got paid money to let those cattle roam in the winter. And they roamed, and they roamed. And we were there another 30 to 40 minutes in the fog, surrounded by cows, behind us, in front of us, next to us, pushing their noses against our windows. Finally, we broke free and we made it home. And I'm telling you, scouting means to be prepared. Scouting means to be ready. But there are days when there's just snow telling. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran.
Thanks, Kate.
And that was a cautionary tale for all of us to remember that if you go to Colorado in October, snow telling what will happen. And watch out for the cattle, too. Our next teller is my long-term producing partner. We're married to different people, but my producing partner, Joe Doolittle. Oh, there's so many things I could share about Joe Doolittle. But storytelling in the Capital District would not be as it is today without his many talents that have gotten us into doorways and places that we never would have been. Joe's story today is a folk tale called The Monk's Story. And when I asked him about the food analogy, he came up with, to my mind, a very un-monk-like food of peanut butter on hot toast. So, Joe, will you tell us about that, please? Oh, just a second, Joe, you're muted.
Yes, thank you, Kate, and it's been a pleasure being a conspirator with you on storytelling for these many years. This is an old story in the French folklore, and nobody knows its origin, but it's been repeated. And the south of France, in Gascony, there's a forest. And in the forest is an abbey. And the abbey is a special place. It's been there for over 500 years. But in the middle of the last century, it was in spiritual problem. It was in decay. The vineyards had not been tended. The gardens were only worked on meagerly. There were only 5 old monks as brothers in the abbey. And the abbot was beside himself of what to do because he felt he'd failed. And he knew the times had changed, but he didn't know what exactly to do. And he talked to many people, but he was aware that there was a rabbi from Bordeaux who came all the way south to renew himself periodically in a cottage in the woods. And one day he saw the smoke rising from where the cottage was, and he said to the other brothers that he was going to go and visit with the rabbi because he hadn't seen him in a while, and he thought maybe he would have some insights into their dilemma. So he walked through the forest, and before he could get to the cottage, there was the rabbi coming toward him. And they looked and they greeted each other as old friends, for they were, and the rabbi invited the abbot in for tea in his cottage, and they started to commiserate. And the abbot described his problem, and the rabbi said, I know exactly what you mean. I have the same predicament up in the big cities. It's why I come down here to think and to renew, because you gotta stay somewhat fresh. I don't know what to do either. And they sipped their tea and they talked of other things. And finally it was time for the abbot to go. And as he was getting up to leave, he said, is there any other word of wisdom? He says, well, you know, it is peculiar. I knew you were coming today because I learned it in a dream. That was why I was on the trail to greet you. Did you learn anything else? Well, it's peculiar. What the dream said to me is that one of you 5 monks could be the Messiah. What do you mean? I don't know what I mean. I only know what I heard. Well, the abbot walks through the woods. His step is a little bit lighter, but a little bit more tentative. What's the meaning of that? And when he got back to the abbey, they all crowded around. What did the rabbi say? And he told them. And they all said, what does that mean? They said, I don't know. And they said to him, you're the abbot, you're supposed to know. He says, I don't know what it means. So they all pondered on the question. And something magical began to happen, because if I'm not the Messiah, then maybe it's Brother Leo. No, it couldn't be Brother Leo, but it could be Brother John. Yes. And they began to treat each other with renewed respect and love. And that feeling began to generate other feeling. And when they went to the village, people began to notice that there was something, a bounce in the step of the monks. And they came back upon invitation, and they had breakfast, and they helped out, and they began to have a little festival. They started a book study, and they decided to open up the school with the help of the people in the village, and things just rolled along. And then one day there was a knock on the door, and two young men stood there, and they said, "We have been so refreshed by our times with you that we would love to become brothers in your order." And they went through the beginning of the vows. And that happened several times. And within the year, there were 20 new young brothers working and caring for each other in the community, in the abbey. And it was a wonder. It was just a wonder. And the old abbot just breathed deeply and decided they'd have another festival. And he wrote to the rabbi in Bordeaux. And sure enough, on that Sunday, there was a group of people from the village. There were many people, friends of the brothers in the abbey, and there were people from the synagogue in Bordeaux, and they shared a feast. And I'm told they drank well and ate well, and I'm also told they had peanut butter on hot toast. I love that story, but I never put the finish on it until I had to come up with an answer to Kate's question.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. Tale from France with a Finnish ending. No, that's not. I am your next teller. I live in Clifton Park. When I asked myself the question, if your story was a food, what would it be? I thought popcorn with just the right amount of butter and salt. Now, this is a new story of mine. This is the world debut. I was helped with it at two, actually, Story Circle monthly meetings. So thank you, members of Story Circle. And Elizabeth Ellis also helped me tidy up, form up, finish. Oh, there we go again. Finish the story. So, and I call it What I Learned from Bill Murray. Now, I imagine a lot of you have been doing new things because of the pandemic. This story is about one of the new things I've been doing. Every morning on my daily walk, I say to almost everyone I meet, "Good morning. I've got a quick, silly joke." When Noah was on the ark, do you know why he didn't fish very much? He only had 2 worms. So when I go out every morning, I do have a joke of the day in mind. But I found that it works best, I get the best connection with my neighbors if I tell a joke that fits the situation. For instance, if it's a rainy day, I say, "Do you know what's worse than raining cats and dogs?" Hailing taxi cabs. Or if it's a buggy day, and during the hot summer days by, the areas by the trees, yeah, there were lots of bugs. One fellow said, "I feel like I need to have a windshield wiper going here." If it's that kind of day, I'll tell, "Do you know why frogs are so happy? They get to eat what bugs them." Now, one day I was passing a house. I didn't know these people. There were, looked like 2 brothers playing soccer in the front yard. And the joke of the day fits so well, I said, usually if people are occupied, and they don't look up at me. You know, they're doing what they need to do to survive the pandemic. So, you know, I shouldn't bother them. But I just couldn't help myself. I said, "Excuse me, I've got a silly joke." And they politely turned and came a little closer. "Do you know why Cinderella was thrown off her soccer team?" The older boy looked high school age, quickly said no, but the younger one looked like a fifth grader. I could see his eyes were moving, and he said, "She ran away from the ball." And I said, "Yes, yes."
That's really good.
So another time, I was walking on one side of the street, and two women were walking on the other side talking. So I didn't interrupt them, except up ahead, I saw a man on the roof. And I said, "I'm sorry, excuse me, I have to interrupt you to tell you this joke. Do you know why the roofer," and I pointed to the man on the roof, "do you know why the roofer did not charge for the shingles?" And they said, "No. They were on the house." Now that's become my go-to joke for men I don't know. Yes, I've found out, I've been developing go-to jokes that I go, "Oh, I should tell them that joke." For instance, if I see like a teenager or a young adult, I'll go for, "Do you know how many software engineers it takes to change a light bulb?" "None. That's a hardware problem." Or now I've run across a few 6-year-olds, and I had to Google to find some jokes for them. And here's my favorite of those. "Do you know where cows go to have fun?" "To the movies." Now, dog walkers. Now, this one I've told a lot. There are a lot of people in my neighborhood who I run across walking their dogs. "Do you know why the man named his dogs Rolex and Timex?" "They were his watchdogs." Now, I've learned to be mindful and to remember to be a giver and not a taker. A giver of laughter, but not a taker of people's time. So that's why I always start off with "good morning," because I'm watching to see how they react. If they don't even, meet my eyes, or they just kind of give a wave, that's it. They're busy, even though they don't look like they are. Yeah, and I've learned that even if I get a really wonderful reaction, I need to stop at just one joke. But I'm ready. If anyone ever asks for a second one, I've got it. They haven't yet. But I'm ready. Now, there are some people that I just don't try to interact with. Like I said, if they seem busy, okay. If, the moving targets, the people on bikes or the joggers, especially if they're going uphill.
Or downhill.
Well, the bikers, they're zipping downhill, but I just smile and wave. However, once I did interact with joggers. I was the one who was coming to the top of the hill. I was 2 driveways away from the top when I noticed that there were 2 runners just cresting the hill and coming down toward me. So I stepped into the driveway so we wouldn't have to do that little dance of social distancing, so they wouldn't have to break their stride. And while I was waiting, I noticed 2 things. 1, they weren't jogging very quickly. And 2, the joke of the day was a quickie. So I blurted out, "Good morning, I've got a quick silly joke. Do you know what the fish said when it hit the cement wall?" The woman immediately said, "No." And I said, "Damn." And as they slowly jogged past me, the guy said, "Nice one." Now there are other people I don't bother. I guess bother's the right word.
Engage.
Engage. Yeah. People who are cleaning up after their dogs. I know that's a task they just want to get over with. And, if I distract them, they, even though I have that really great dog joke, I'll wait for another day when they're not cleaning up and then do it. And then finally, there have been some outdoor house renovation projects going on. And the people who are on a roof are using a nail gun, or even worse yet, using a table saw, I don't even look in their direction. I do not want to distract these people from what they are doing. Now, you might be wondering what sort of reactions I've been getting. Oh, I've been getting a lot of smiles and a whole range of laughter, from snorts, which I like a lot, to chuckles, and then, gales of laughter. And people say, "Thank you." And I say, "My pleasure." Or, "Now you have a joke to share." But there are a few people who've just said, "Oh," or "uh-huh." And I think to myself, they didn't get the joke, or they didn't want the joke. So I quickly say, "Thanks for listening," and I take off. But better than gales of laughter, what I have gotten sometimes are requests. People recognize me. I wear this big blue hat to shade my face, and they say, "Do you have a joke today?" I say, "Of course." One fellow just goes, and so I hit him with a joke, the joke of the day, because he's heard a whole lot of them. I remember, though, if it's a real good one, like the Rolex and Timex, I remember hasn't heard it. So next time I see him, I have to tell him Rolex and Timex. Twice now, cars have stopped while they're passing me. The first car was this guy who rolled down the window and said, "Do I still get a joke even if I'm not walking?" I said, "Of course." The second car that stopped on another day was Joe, a neighbor I had known before the pandemic. But I've subsequently seen him walking his dog. But I haven't seen him since I learned the Rolex and Timex. So that's in my list of, when I see Joe, tell him that joke. Anyways, this day, Joe rolls down his window and says, "Kate, I've got this joke I've been dying to tell you."
That's great.
But what's even better than the requests are the friends that I've made. Oh, there are a number of houses. If I see them, I stop and we often have a nice conversation. I'm getting really good at small talk. It's amazing. One of my new friends, whom I see quite a lot, our schedules seem to mesh, is Marie. And she mentioned one day that she liked opera a lot. And I said, "I'm going to find you an opera joke." So the next time I saw her, I said, "Do you know how opera divas warm up their voice?" And she said, "No." Do, re, mi, me, 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 me. Yeah, I've gotten a lot of pleasure out of telling silly jokes in my neighborhood. But that wasn't my goal when I started out. Where I live in upstate New York, we closed down in March. And I realized that my dance lessons, my only form of exercise, weren't going to happen for who knows how long. And I needed to find another form of exercise, or I'd start gaining weight. That was inevitable. So once again, I decided to try to start to walk in my neighborhood every day. I tried starting to develop this habit a number of occasions. It never lasted. That first day, though, I remember thinking, I don't know what's going to happen, but today I'm alive and I can walk in my neighborhood. And damn it, I'm going to say hello to everybody I see. I've lived in the Northeast all my life, and we usually don't say hello to strangers. But I said, damn it, I'm alive today. They're alive today. I'm going to say hello. I realize that's a rather belligerent, living in the moment sort of statement, but that was my frame of mind that first day. But it quickly morphed into something I've been doing for years, since 2000 at least. In those little bits of time when I'm waiting for something and someone is nearby, I tell a silly joke. Like when I'm in a store and waiting for my credit card to be approved, there's this little gap of time when I can share a silly joke. Or when I'm checking out books at the library or in my bank, it's a small branch, these people are looking forward to these little silly jokes. But telling these jokes in my neighborhood during the pandemic, I've come to realize is good for all of us, for me and for my neighbors, because it's giving us a tiny respite from the pandemic. As one of my neighbors said the first time she heard me tell a silly joke, this is a great way to start a day. So this is one of the things I've been doing because of the pandemic. I'm beginning to feel like Bill Murray in the movie Groundhog Day. Every day I'm getting a little bit better at my neighborhood pop-up comedy show. Now, in case any of you are now considering starting your own neighborhood pop-up comedy show, I've put my collection of jokes on my website, katedutting.com, jokes.pdf. Now, my collection is currently 33 pages long. Now, not all of those jokes are good for a pop-up comedy show. No. Some of them are longer jokes, and I use them in my other daily gig, my joke of the day for my Facebook friends. But that's another story. I'll just end by saying, when the worms got on Noah's Ark, do you know why they weren't in apples? They had to go in pairs. Thanks for listening.
Oh.
Oh.
Thank you for your laughter. It's really wonderful to hear.
I'm just totally amazed at your memory of all those jokes.
Well, when you tell 3 or 4 of them a day for 5 months, I could go on, but I will not. I'll stop at one story. That's right. Okay. Now, our last teller before intermission is our very own Claire Nolan, and half of the audience is related to her. We realize that. And Claire has been assisting with the Zoom details. Stuff, yes. Claire's story is from the Hindu tradition, from the
Mahabharat.
Thank you. Yes, from that wonderful, famous ancient book collection. And when I asked her the food question, she said her story would be like spicy curry. So, Claire Nolan, take it away.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much. Kate does so much for Story Circle. We can't thank her enough. And she put all of this together. Yeah, let's hear it for Kate. And I've been putting in the chat some of the websites that you can go to. Many of you have already signed up to be on our mailing list, and that's great. Some of you received the link from other people, and maybe you're not on the mailing list yet, but the information is in the chat if you'd like to join the mailing list. And also, if you want to relive the stories or tell people who couldn't be with us, or like Joe, if you have to leave early or tuned in late, you can watch these stories again, and that information is also in the chat, and I'll add it again. So thank you again, Kate, and thank you everyone for being here, and so lovely to see my brothers and sisters and my mother and all my dear friends in the storytelling world. Once upon a time, there was a princess, and her name was Kunti. And Kunti lived in a beautiful palace, as many princesses do. And in this palace, she was the head daughter, the head princess, and she had many responsibilities. So one day, a famous rishi, a holy man, came to stay at the palace. And it was quite an honor to have him come to the palace. And the king and the queen and Kunti and all the people in the palace were very glad that he was there. But it soon became obvious that he could quickly overstay his welcome. He was not a very nice person. He was always in a bad mood. He was a grumpy guy, a curmudgeon. No one could seem to make him happy, no matter how hard they tried. And Kunti and the king and the queen soon realized that having him there was useful, because a holy man of his power could be very good for the family. But if they should insult him in any way, then that could be very bad. So it became Kunti's responsibility to make sure that this holy man had everything he needed. And Kunti did her best, and she did her job well. She made sure that he had the tastiest food, always ready for him. She made sure that the palace was quiet and peaceful when he wanted to meditate and pray. Kunti made sure that his bed was comfortable, that the room was neither too hot nor too cold. She was a wonderful hostess. Young as she was, she did her job well. Well, at last the day came when this rishi was saying goodbye, and it didn't come soon enough. He had been there for an entire year, and no one was sad to see him go. And before he left the palace, this rishi called Kunti to him, and he thanked her for his care of her. And he said, Kunti, I'm not entirely sure why I even came here to your palace. I'm not sure why I stayed so long, but I did. And I want to give you a gift, Kunti. I want to give something to you. What is it that you would like? I can honor many boons. And Kunti thought, and she said, no, really, you owe me nothing. I did what I must do as the daughter of the house. It was my pleasure to make sure that your time here in the palace was as pleasant as it could be. No, you owe me nothing. But the rishi wanted to repay her in some way. And so before he left, he whispered a mantra in her ear. And this mantra went into her ear and into her mind and into her heart. And she didn't know why, but it touched her deeply. She didn't understand what it was for. And she said, why do you give me this mantra? What is it? What can I do with it? And he said, Kunti, when you are ready, pray that mantra, and any God you call upon will come to you and give to you a child. And he left. Kunti was amazed and surprised and troubled by this. But she had many responsibilities, lots of things to do, and so she didn't think about it very much, and soon she completely forgot about it. Till many months later, early one morning as the sun rose in the east and came through her window while she was still in bed, that sunlight came through her window and it touched her hair and caressed her with its warmth and touched her cheeks and her lips, her breasts, went down her body, the sunlight, warm and caressing till it reached her very toes. And she opened her eyes, and there in her room now filled completely with golden sunlight, there stood a man. Not just any man. This was Surya, the god of the sun. He had come to her own room. This mantra had come to her mind, to her lips unbidden. She hadn't asked for this. She said, "Oh, my Lord, why are you here?" He said, "Kunti, you called me. I'm here for you. You know why I am here." "No," she said, "no, please, please go away. I don't want what you have to give. I'm just a girl. I'm unmarried. No, think of it. I can't have a baby." But he said, "You called me. I must give you what you have asked for." And Surya, the god of the sun, entered into Kunti and filled her with his blazing heat. And when it was all over, Kunti lay there on her bed, trembling, now alone in her room that seemed dark after that blazing sunlight. And Kunti knew that she would bear a child, the son of Surya. Surprisingly, no one noticed in the palace as her body began to change. Not her mother and father, not her serving women. No one saw the changes taking place. She was grateful, but surprised by this. And the days and the weeks and the months went by until one night, Kunti was awakened late at night by the birth pangs, and she knew that the baby would be born. She was frightened. She was alone. She didn't dare call anyone to help her. But the birth was much easier than she expected. And before long, she held that sweet little boy in her arms. The son of Surya, the child of the sun, he glowed like his father. Oh, she studied him. She examined every little part of his beautiful little body. His black hair, his eyes, his little lotus lips. She counted his fingers and toes, and he had 10 of each. Kunti had not seen very many babies, but it seemed to her that this son of hers was the most beautiful she had ever seen. But she wondered at him also, because in his ears were these golden earrings that shone bright, filled the room with their light, and his sweet little torso was covered with armor, golden armor. These were gifts from his father to protect him. Kunti nursed her baby. She held him close. She murmured words of love and affection in his little ears. And then she saw the sky out her window was brightening and the stars leaving the sky. She knew that soon it would be daylight and the palace would come alive and her serving women would come to her and they would see this baby and they would ask questions and they would want to know, where had this baby come from? Who was the father? And Kunti realized that Her reputation as a chaste princess would be destroyed. She realized that her value as a bride would come to nothing. She had to do something about this child. She had to hide him somewhere, somehow. She looked frantically around her room, trying to find a place, and there she saw a beautiful box, a wooden box, magnificently carved. It held her most beautiful saris. She took the saris out, all except one, a soft sari made of silk. It was shot with gold thread. She wrapped it around this little baby, and she placed him in the box that held him perfectly. And she lifted up the box, and she walked out of the palace. She walked to the river. She waded into the water, into the middle of the stream, and she placed that box in the water. She held on to it. She could feel the water tugging it, but she held on, and she looked at her little baby, and she offered a prayer to his father. The son, please, please watch over my baby all of his days. Bring him safely to manhood. Find him a family. And she thought of the woman who would find her baby and raise him as his own. And she said a prayer to that woman. She said, please, please, as you listen to his first sweet words, as you watch him take his first toddling steps, think of me, his mother, whom you don't know. But please, don't judge me harshly. Please care for my baby. Please love him as I love him. And then she closed the lid of that box. She let go, and the current of that river took the box away from her. And she watched as the sun came up and shone on the water and shone on the box. She watched until that box disappeared from her sight. And then Kunti, the young princess, returned to the palace, and she was never really happy again. But what about that little box floating on that little river, that little box floating with its precious treasure inside? That little river took that box with it when it joined a bigger river. And that bigger river took the box as it joined the mighty Ganga, that holiest of all rivers. And there the river took the box to the shore, and it came to rest among some reeds. And on that beautiful riverbank was a man and a woman, Adarata and Radha. Adarata, the charioteer, and his wife, newly married, they came every day to bathe in that holy river and to offer prayers. And you know what they prayed for. They prayed for a child. They prayed fervently for a child to come to them. Radha noticed the box first, and she said, Adarata, what is that there in the reeds? And he waded out into the water, and he took the box, and he brought it, floated it back to his wife where she waited. They admired the beautiful box, magnificently carved. The wood shone in the sunlight. And together, the husband and the wife opened the box, and there inside was a baby, the answer to all of their prayers. Oh, but whose baby was it? Look at the sari that he's wrapped in. Look at those earrings. What is this on his little body? His golden armor. Who is he? Could they keep him? Each day, they anxiously awaited for news that someone had stolen or lost a little baby. Day after day, they waited and no news came. Weeks and months went by, no one came looking for this little baby. They named him Karna, which means long ears, but they called him many sweet names. But even into his adulthood, he was known as Radha's son. So Kunti's prayer was answered. Her baby boy had found a mother to love him.
Wow.
Thank you, Claire,
Thank you, Kate. I gotta find you. There you are.
for sharing that ancient story told so expressively and with your little visual aid of lemons to lemonade in your background.
Overprotective mom lets niece look after her baby. Minutes later, she receives this heart-stopping photo.
So now we're going to take a short intermission, like 4 minutes. And I'd just like to mention as we go that if you'd like to make a donation to our storytellers, here's information. It's also in, Claire's put it in the chat. We realize that many people have been financially impacted by COVID-19. Any amount that you are able to donate will be greatly appreciated. Proctor's, the Performing Arts Center, where we normally perform, is graciously handling our online donations for us. So, that was a brief intermission. I missed Siri Allison's lovely baked goods, but you know, this is just virtual. Next time I'll bring my own s'mores or whatever. Our next teller is my good friend. Of course, all these tellers are my good friend, but Margaret French from Saratoga Springs. She's telling a personal story called The Long Bike Ride. And when I asked the food question, she said sardines, which has showed up in Fran Berger's story.
For sardines.
Yes. So for another fishy story, over to you, Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you. So I was in Prince Edward Island. You know, that lovely little province in eastern Canada. And I was steps away from the Confederation Bike Trail, which runs almost the entire length of the province. And I was in an outhouse, and I was not alone. My biking friend Claire was with me. It was raining, it was pouring. The rain was hammering the metal walls of the outhouse. There was thunder, there was lightning. I did wonder what would happen if lightning struck that metal outhouse. Would we be cooked like sardines in a can? We were trying to smush together the wet pieces of our map so we could figure out where the heck we were before it got too dark to read. This was day one of a planned 6-day bike trip, and it might be our last day too. Now, I hate to admit it, but I didn't want to leave the outhouse. I mean, it was dry, it was clean as outhouses can possibly be. There were no mosquitoes inside, and it was big enough for 2 people. It occurred to me that it might not be a bad place to spend the night. We could get back on the trail the next day. And then I realized just how very low I had fallen. Now, It had not been raining when we left Tignish, which was the western end of the trail. Our tour operator, Cynthia, had given us our bikes, and she had our luggage ready to take to the first place we were staying that night. And it was lovely. The sun was shining. It was supposed to be a lovely day. Claire, who was a very confident woman, said, "I shall not take my jacket with me. It is not going to rain today." And she gave her jacket to Cynthia to take with her luggage. And we started off. And we had barely left before the first drops of rain fell. We got to the first little village past Tignish, and we sat on the steps of the library waiting for the rain to stop, but it didn't stop. So what are we going to do? We have to get back on our bikes and get going because we had a long way to go. And the rain fell. Storm after storm with thunder and lightning fell. Buckets of water fell. We were drenched in our heads, our clothes, our shoes, our feet, the bicycles, the backpacks on the bicycles, everything in the backpacks. Later on, we realized why Cynthia had put empty Ziploc bags in the bike bags, but it was too late by then. But we kept going. The rain kept falling, and that broad path, that stone-crushed path, changed into two narrow rivers of water separated by a rough patch in the middle. And we pedaled through the rivers of water with the wet water splashing up our legs. There was not another soul on the trail. Nobody. I mean, I imagined that they were all home in their snug little, cute little cottages, watching the storm through the picture window. We stopped at a covered picnic table, thinking it would be a good place to look at the map. And when we got off our bikes, we found out that the rain somehow blew into onto the table anyway, and worse. Out from the grass and the bushes and the trees came swarms of mosquitoes, giant Canadian mosquitoes, deadly mosquitoes, determined to suck every drop of blood out of our bodies. It reminded me of The African Queen. Now, some of you are old enough to remember the scene where Katharine Hepburn and what's his name?
Humphrey Bogart.
Humphrey Bogart, yes. They pull their boat too close to shore, and the bugs swarm out and almost drive them mad. It was exactly that. Now, I had bought insect repellent, but I had forgotten to bring it with me. But Claire, she had insect repellent. But it was, the skin so soft type of insect repellent. It does nothing. Mosquitoes, they need industrial strength DEET. But we slathered this on, we sprayed it. Nothing. Now, my feeling was that Claire is a doctor. I believe that medical schools ought to be teaching people what to do about Canadian mosquitoes. Now, I realize that this is not rational or fair, but I was way past rational. We had to get going. The lightning was bad. I wondered whether it would be better and safer, considering all that lightning flashing around us, to jump off our bicycles and lay in the ditch so we wouldn't get struck by lightning, or maybe we would be safer on our bikes considering the rubber tires. I didn't know, but we kept pedaling until we got mercifully to the outhouse, our refuge in the storm. Now, I realized that I was not entirely prepared for a 6-day bike ride across a province. I hadn't actually ridden a bike in years. I hadn't ridden a bike in decades. But Claire had assured me that it was no problem. And Claire is a confident woman. She has gone on bike tours in Europe. She has ridden a bike from Vermont all the way to Montreal. She is confident. She's attractive. She's athletic. She takes spin classes at the Y. And she looks and acts way younger than me, but she isn't. And we were both really, really slow. And it got us into a lot of trouble. Now, in my preparation for this long bike trip, I had wanted to walk. Claire talked me out of it. I probably wasn't prepared to walk the length of Prince Edward Island either, but that's another story. So I bought a bike and I practiced riding it. Now, the first day I practiced riding the bike, I smashed into a neighbor's flaming euonymus bush, hoping that my neighbor hadn't noticed. And the next day I practiced, I found out that I couldn't go down a hill and around a curve at the same time. And I tumbled off the bike and I broke the headlights and I scraped my knee. And after that, I was afraid. Now, specifically, what I was afraid of were narrow paths, rough paths, ditches, going up hills, going down hills, cars, bikes, and pedestrians. Now, I was particularly afraid of families with little children on wobbly bikes with puppies, because I realized that those people, they never understood that I was as wobbly as their children and as unpredictable as their dogs. But the day came. The day came when I had to, after mastering circles and figure eights in empty parking lots, that I had to drive with Claire to Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. And a few days later, there I was in an outhouse in Prince Edward Island. Well, much as I wanted to, you can't stay in an outhouse forever. And we had to get back on our wet bikes with our wet bodies and start pedaling through those narrow little rivers again with the water splashing up our legs. We didn't complain, neither one of us. No point. Well, we complained the next day and the day after that, but we didn't complain at the moment, which I thought was good of us. I remember Claire's comments the next day when asked about our first day. It was awful. She said it's so much better than I could. Well, we pedaled down. It was getting late in the day. We still didn't know exactly where we were. And it was getting late. And we were so slow. I thought I'd better call Cynthia. Maybe she could tell us where we were. I had my phone turned off because I was afraid of an emergency. I didn't want it to go dead after I crashed into a ditch and broke my leg and needed help. And when I turned my phone on and called Cynthia, she said, "Are you all right? Where are you? I heard that you haven't reached Mill River yet." So she said, "Next time, tomorrow," she said, "you have an iPhone. We'll use Find My Friends. And if you need help, I'll know exactly where you are and I can get to you quickly." So I told her the name of the last road we'd crossed. And she says, "Good, you're close." She said, the next road you come to, get off the trail, go down the road a couple of kilometers, you'll come to a T, make a right, and that you'll see the sign for the Mill River Resort on your left. This was good. I was a little scared having to be on an honest to God road, but we got to the Mill River Resort. I saw the sign, and there was a golf cart sitting beside the road. And my thought was, I hope that cart is for us. But when you think about it, how many people play golf in thunderstorms, in the dark? It was for us. The young man took our bikes, he put them in the back of the cart. He had a pile of clean white towels for us to try and dry ourselves off a little bit. And he drove us down the wooded path to the resort. And when we were checking in, the man checking us in smiled at us. They had taken our bikes, they'd locked them up safely. He said, "Cynthia wants you to know the dinner's on her, and she wants you to order a bottle of wine." So we went to our rooms, we cleaned up, we had dinner, we slept. The next morning, I thought to myself, our bikes must be filthy. I'll go down and clean them. When I got downstairs, Cynthia was already there. She'd cleaned our bikes. She checked them over to make sure everything was fine. We had breakfast together. And she said, "Now I have a suggestion. Why don't I drive you and your bikes to the Potato Museum, a little further down the road, and you can see the museum, and you can start from there." And Claire said immediately, "Great idea." And that's what we did. It was a fabulous museum, especially if you like potatoes. And after that, every day, Claire had another suggestion for a shorter and very scenic itinerary. And every day we gratefully accepted. Now you should know that after that, the sun shone every day. The weather was in the 70s every day. We were never bothered by mosquitoes again. We stayed at lovely places. We met wonderful people. We had seafood every day. Every other day of the trip was perfect. I'm thinking of going back to Prince Edward Island. I'm thinking I might like to walk this time. And I'll have Cynthia help me with the itinerary. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Margaret. So many lessons we learned from that one, but I think you ended with the most important one. Interrogate your potential tour operator, and what would you do if the first day on our vacation we were almost drowned by the rain? What would you do? And if they don't answer, pay for your dinner, including a bottle of wine, move on to the next tour operator. So our next storyteller is Elliot Nieves. He looks just as close as anybody else, but he's coming to us from Ithaca, New York. He's sharing a folktale from Senegal today called The Story of Aniko. I think I pronounced that right, but I'm not sure. And the answer to the food question is sweet and sour jackfruit. So Elliot, please share with us that folktale.
Hello, everyone. My story is rather short, and it is a folktale from Senegal, where they speak the Wolof language. And if you use your imaginations, you might hear a song or two in the Wolof language. It's the story of Aniko. Once, there was a little girl named Aniko who lived happily in her village with her mother, her father, her sisters, and brothers, until one day a very bad thing began to happen. A terrible sickness swept through the village like an angry fire. No one was spared except Aniko. The poor girl was grief-stricken and lonely. She didn't know what to do, but she knew that she couldn't remain there. So, very sadly, she got up and began walking away from her village, the only home she had known since birth. She walked and she walked until she came to the edge of a very thick forest. Now, there were stories about this forest, the stories of the people who had entered and were never seen again. But there were also stories of a village just on the other side of the forest that would, just like in Aniko's own home, a stranger will be welcomed in. But first, she had to enter this forest. Aniko said a silent prayer and she walked in. She walked and she walked, pushing aside white leaves and long vines. She was tired, but she persevered. And her prayers must have been answered that day because she did find a path that led out of the forest. She walked on that path that led out. What a beautiful country this is, she thought. Soon the village came into view, and the villagers were coming to greet her when she noticed something quite strange. These villagers had a very peculiar characteristic. You see, they had long, very long necks with their heads at the top of their necks. Even their babies had long necks with little heads at the top. Aniko had never seen anything like this before. Now the villagers were about to greet her, but they couldn't believe their eyes. You see, Aniko had a short neck, just like yours or mine. And they had never seen something like this before. So they didn't know what to do or say. But one of them did ask what a little girl like Aniko would be doing in that forest alone. She began to tell them the story of what happened to her family, and to her village. Something about Aniko made the long necks trust her. So they told her to stay with them. And they were right. She was warm, she was caring and respectful. She worked with the villagers, she danced with them, she played with them, and she accompanied the long necks to the marketplace. And she shared in their celebrations and their sorrows. But the thing that was most special about Aniko was that she would rise up early, walk across the village, singing a song. Now, if you close your eyes, you might just hear Aniko's beautiful song. The song said, I'm coming to wake you. I am awake. I am up. A new day has begun. I am coming to wake you also, people. Now, back in her old village, singing was part of Aniko's life, but strangely as it may seem to you, the villagers here had never heard singing before. And they decided that this was a very special way to wake up in the morning. So they would not get up out of their beds and go about their work until they heard Aniko's sweet song. They loved her especially because of this special gift she brought to them. But in this village, as in every village in the world, there was an evil, jealous, small-hearted man who didn't like Aniko because she was different. So one day, he called her aside and said, "Come here, you, come here. I don't like you. You are different. You have a short neck. Differences can only bring trouble to this village. You should take yourself away from here." Poor Aniko, her heart was wounded. So she ran off. And before she knew it, she found herself back in that thick forest. Now the rainy season had come, so the vines had grown longer and the leaves were wider. The foliage was so thick that she couldn't see where she was stepping. She was afraid. She had to stop and she rested. Night fell quickly. Now in the morning, the long necks were lying in the beds waiting for Aniko's sweet song, but there was only silence. So one by one, they began to rise and say, "Have you seen Aniko? Where's Aniko? Has anyone seen Aniko?" So they gathered in the center of the village. And one of the elders said, "I think I know whom I know something about this." And he led them to the home of that evil, jealous, small-hearted man who told them, almost with pride, how he had sent the strange one away because she was different. The villagers were furious. They had to find a way to bring Aniko back home safely, but what could they do? If they entered that forest, they might get lost themselves. One of Aniko's friends had an idea. She said, "Well, why don't we sing to Aniko? And if she hears our voices, that will lead her back to us." Well, not only had they never heard singing before, they had never tried singing themselves, but they knew they had to try because this was important. So they decided to sing Aniko's name and tell her that they were sad and wanted her to return. Again, you might be able to listen and hear the voices singing, first timidly and then louder and stronger.
Aniko ni seweni, wo chikane nene, wo chikane nene, he ho bisini, he ho bisini.
The song said, "Aniko, we are sad without you. Whoa, whoa, Aniko, we ask you to return. We are lonely without you." The voices carried in the air and they traveled far as they got louder and louder, all the way to the forest where Aniko was sitting. When she heard the voices and the singing, she knew it was the Longnecks asking her to return, and she followed the voices that led to the path that led out of the forest and back to the village. When she got back and the villagers saw her, they rejoiced knowing that she was safe. And they told her that she could stay with them for as long as she wanted. Now, the chief of the village said to Aniko, to the villagers, and to that evil, jealous, small-hearted man, "It is not the length of the neck that is important. What is important is what's in your heart." And that's the story of Aniko.
Oh, what a lovely story, Elliot, and the wonderful message and the music that magically appeared whenever you called it.
Is she going to take a bow?
Oh no.
Oh.
He's offset.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
So we've heard stories from long ago and personal stories, all dealing with lemons to lemonade. And Sandy Schumann is going to finish off our program today with his personal story called My First Story. When I asked about food, he said, a cracked, hard-boiled egg. Sandy, tell us more.
I thought you'd never ask. When I was a little boy, my father used to tell me bedtime stories. Now, he was not one to read from a book. He would tell me stories out of his head. And most of the stories that he told were about him, personal stories. One in particular that I liked to hear was when he was a schoolboy. And after school, they would go into the schoolyard and play games. On this particular occasion, the game was dodgeball. One boy stood in the middle with a circle of boys around him, and he had the ball, and he would throw the ball and try to hit one of the boys in the circle. When he hit a boy, that boy was out. And the boy in the center would throw the ball again and again. He got all of the boys out except for my father. My father was small, but he was very fast, and he dodged the ball every time, so he won the game. Then it was time to play the next game. This game was going to have two different teams, so the two oldest boys took turns picking the younger boys to be on their team. I'll take you, I'll take you. They took turns. They picked all of the boys except for my father. He was an odd man out. And so he walked home all alone. Now, I cannot tell you why I asked my father to tell me that story over and over again. I don't know why, but I like to hear it. And then it would be time for me to go to bed, and my father would kiss me goodnight, and I would bring this image to mind as I was trying to fall asleep. An image of a grandfatherly figure sitting in a big chair, and in front of him he had a big book, and on his lap was a little boy, and he was reading to the little boy from this big book. And this big book, on the pages of that big book, was the story of my day. It was the story of me they were reading. And as he was coming to the end of the page, the little boy would climb off of his lap, and the grandfatherly figure would close the book and set it on a table, and I would fall asleep. Years went by. At the age of 15, grappling with the meaning of life, I decided that the purpose of life was to gather stories to tell your grandchildren. But I was worried because I didn't have any stories. I knew all those stories that my father told, but I didn't have any stories that were mine. Well, that summer, I joined the high school farm cadet program. This was a program for high school students. You left the city and lived and worked on a farm for the whole summer. You got room, board, laundry, and $18 a week. Now, today, $18 a week is not very much money. But back then, $18 a week was not very much money. I was told by some of the older students that if you made an extra effort, you might get an extra couple of dollars at the end of the week. Well, I wanted those extra couple of dollars, and so I did my very best. I was working that summer on a poultry farm. It was an egg farm. And 11 hours a day, I was on my feet, collecting eggs, washing eggs, grading eggs. Any eggs that got cracked, they were saved for the family. And that was the summer I ate more cracked, hard-boiled eggs than any other. Did you all get that? Cracked, hard-boiled eggs. I just wanted to point that out for you. And standing up 11 hours a day, I can still feel the pain in my legs. Well, one Friday, end of the week, this was payday, all of our work was done for the day. It was still light out, this is the summer. And the boss went into the new hen house. They had about 12,000 birds altogether in different houses. And the new hen house was so called because it had the youngest birds. They hadn't begun laying eggs yet, but it was the oldest house. It was the original, it was small. There were maybe only 100 birds in this hen house. And when you're producing eggs, you only want hens. So you order from the hatchery, you order day-old chicks, and you want only females. And there are people who are specially trained to identify the sex of day-old chicks. And they are remarkably accurate. They can get it right 90% of the time. But that means in a house of 100 birds, there's going to be maybe 90 pullets, young hens, and maybe 10 cockerels, young male chickens. And so he took the leg hook. Now this is a long metal rod with a question mark hook at the end and a wood handle. If you just walk up to a chicken, they're going to run away. They're stupid, but they're not that stupid. So you use this leg hook, 8-10 feet long, and you very carefully spot the rooster that you want. Now you could tell these are still, 3 or 4 month old birds, and the males are beginning to develop these curved sickle feathers. If you can picture a rooster, you got those curved sickle feathers. Hens don't get those. So 3-4 months old, you can tell which the roosters are. Now, if I could digress for a minute, it's well more than 100 years ago, a fella in a tavern in the southern part of New York State ordered a drink with 2 different kinds of liquor in it. Now, this was an unusual thing. The tavern owner had never heard of that, but he did what the guy wanted, and he put these 2 liquors together and mixed it up. And to give it an extra little added flourish, he decorated it with one of those sickle-shaped feathers from a rooster. And he called it a cocktail. Now that we've got that bit of etymology out of the way, we can come back to my story. So the boss finds the roosters, uses the leg hook, puts them all in a crate, and the crate is sitting outside the hen house in the yard there. I didn't know what he was going to do with them, but I saw 2 fellas drive up in an old car, and they bought 2 roosters for $25, and so I figured the boss was just going to sell them off. Well, a short while later, I looked out the window again, and the crate was empty. Apparently, they hadn't closed the door on the crate, and the roosters had escaped. Well, I thought this was my chance to put out that extra effort. Even though the workday was over, maybe I'd get a couple extra dollars. So I went in the hen house, got the leg hook, looked all over the yard, found those roosters, carefully brought them back into the crate and closed the little door securely. And I thought for sure I'd get a thank you and maybe a couple of extra dollars. But I didn't get either. Now you might think that story is just a bunch of lemons, but the lemonade, of course, is that I got this story. It was my first story. And now our storytelling is coming to a close, and you might think if this has been a sweet time for you that now we're getting the lemons, but I'll tell you how you can make lemonade out of it. You see, tonight when I go to sleep, I'm going to bring that image to mind of the grandfatherly figure with the little boy on his lap and the big book in front of him. And they're going to be reading that book, The Story of My Day. And when I look into that book on the pages of my story today, I will see all of you. And if you do the same, you'll see me and everybody else on this Zoom screen. And we will forever be connected by our stories.
Thank you, Sandy. Yes, indeed, we are corrected. Yes, indeed, Sandy, we are connected by our stories. Hadn't practiced that, hadn't known it was coming. So thank you for tying up this program so well. I'd like to thank all of you for coming. I would like to mention once again that if you care to donate and you're able to, Claire is going to put in the chat once again these links. Our storytellers will be getting all of this money minus the credit card charges that the credit companies charge. And I'd also like to, if you're interested to know that this performance will be rebroadcast in the next week or so on Open Stage Media's Arts and Education channel. It's public access run by Proctors, and that's their website. If you'd like to find out about other virtual storytelling events, you can go to Story Circle at Proctor's website, and on the upper right corner of every page is about next shows. And you can see there's one on September 18th, Stories Around the Steeple, and the Storytelling Night at Cafe Lena on September 22nd. And then below there's a link for additional storytelling events, and you can find out about other events there. And of course, I have to mention, we hope that you'll come back on the second Sunday of October. All of our programs this year will be on the second Sundays. We are taking December off, and our topic on October 11th is truths and lies. Once again, thank you all for being with us, and we hope that you'll come back.